I was doing a lot of commercials when I lived in New York, and I was much younger, 30, 40 years younger. And I got cast in this one commercial for Gillette. The whole commercial took place in the 1920s, so we had costumes for baseball players. I got on the bus, and there was one empty seat, so I sat next to it. I sat in it, and next to it was a very strange-looking actor with a big white mustache. And I thought, if I was casting this 1920 movie, I would cast him in a minute. And I said, "What's your name?" He said, Andy Milligan. "What's yours?" I said, "John Miranda." He said, "What do you do?" I said, "What? What do you mean, what do I do?" "I'm an actor, aren't you?" He said, "No, I'm a director. But they liked my look, so I'm an actor today." And he said, "Give me your telephone number, because when I do a movie, I'll call you and put you in it." I said, "Okay." And I said to myself, I think this is an axe murderer or a serial killer, and I'm about to give him my telephone number. And about 2 weeks later, the phone rings. He said, "Pack your bag." I said, "Who is this telling me to pack my bag?" He said, "It's Andy Milligan." I said, "I don't know any Andy Milligan." He said, "We did a commercial together." I said, "Oh, Andy." He said, "We're going to go to London next week." I said, "No, we're not." He said, "Yes, we are. Pack your bag. You're going to go to London. You're going to play Sweeney Todd in my version of The Bloodthirsty Butcher." I said, "Is this for real, Andy?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, but I want to meet you first for a cup of coffee and talk to you." And he said, "Okay." Turned out he lived 2 blocks away from me. So we met and we talked, and I decided he was on the level, but he didn't have much money, and he said he would pay me $100 a day, plus the trip and the hotel. I said, "That's fine, because I've always wanted to go to London." So off we went to London, and that's how I got the lead in The Bloodthirsty Butcher. I didn't read for it, I didn't audition for it, just showed up and started shooting. It was shot in London, England. I was the only one he took to London, and then he cast the rest of the movie in London. But it was shot in London, England. It was very organized. We had to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and everybody was there at 9 o'clock in the morning. The cast, the crew, everybody. And we had to work and work fast, because he was paying by the day. We very rarely did 2 takes, even if it was awful. There was one scene where a guy had his head cut off, and Andy put it on some Reynolds wrap. He made a hole in the table, the guy stuck his head through it and put some Reynolds wrap around it. Then he poured blood on the guy's head. And I said to Andy, "You can't use that shot." And he said, "Why?" I said, "The stuff is dripping in his eyes and he's blinking." He said, "Oh, that's all right. They'll think it's nerves." I said, "Nerves?" He said, "Haven't you seen a chicken when they cut his head off? He runs around. That's what this is." I said, "Okay." He said, "Cut." And when I went to see the movie, there it was, the guy's blinking like crazy. I do remember Annabella very fondly. She was a very nice English lady, and worked very professionally, came in, knew all her lines, knew everything, was all ready. People at that time were happy to work, even if it was a crappy thing by Andy Milligan. He was strange. He was perfect for the part because he was strange. And I said to Andy, "Keep me away from him." He said, "He's perfect for this." I said, "I know he is, but I'm talking about real life." And he said, don't worry, he's tame as a pussycat." And it turned out that he was.
"No, only in Dublin, my mother."
But what are you planning to do here, lad?
The guy comes in,
You wouldn't know of any job.
and he said, "I'm here to have a haircut." And he had some kind of strange accent. And pretty soon I realized that I was picking up his accent. I was mimicking him. And Andy said to me, "I have a blood pack under his throat, there's a little steel plate. So really cut into it, because you got to cut the blood pack, and it won't hurt him because his whole throat is protected. And I said, okay. And this is the first time we did it, no rehearsals. And he said, I want to do it in one take. And I said, okay. So we get to it, and we get to the scene, and I close the curtains, and I get the razor, and I look at it, and it's pretty sharp, and Andy comes in on the razor, and then he tells me to go over to the chair, and I go over to the chair, and I talked to the guy a little bit, and then I went, choom, and the blood went, phoom, all over me, all over the place, and I went, ah! And he said, cut, cut, cut. He said, John, why did you act afraid? You're the bloodthirsty butcher. You shouldn't be afraid. And I said, I didn't expect that. He said, oh, Christ, now we've got to clean you up, get you another costume, clean up the whole set. So we broke for lunch, and the whole crew did that. And when we came back, the next time I didn't shriek. I just picked up his hand, said, and I couldn't get the ring off his finger. So I lopped off his hand and took the ring off. This was culture. I was dealing with somebody who was as crazy as I was, so I thought, this is one of the worst scripts I've ever read. I don't have to worry about it. Oh yes, he was a big producer, and he loved Andy's stuff, because Andy did an entire movie for $12,000. The sets, the costume, the actors, the salaries. He did everything for $12,000. And Michigan was a producer. And he would take this crappy movie and take it to 42nd Street on Broadway and advertise, bloodthirsty butcher, it'll curl your hair, it'll curl your blood, it'll make, and the people poured in. It ran there over 2.5 months in one movie house. My sister drove by one day and she said, would you please get into something a little more classic? I said, sure, I'll try Macbeth next time.
Well, hello, Johnny. How are you? How's your mother?
I think it was right after that I got into a Broadway show called Oliver, and I didn't mention it. And then one night somebody came in the dressing room and he said, you gonna cut anybody's head off tonight? I said, yours, keep your mouth shut. He did everything to save the money. And he worked all night long on a sewing machine. He made women's dresses, he made their hats, he tailored men's jackets for them. And I couldn't keep a steady accent. As soon as I would hear one of the crew that was from Ireland, I'd have an Irish accent. And as soon as I heard somebody from London, I'd have a British accent. But Andy didn't seem to mind. I said to him, Andy, this is not going to work this way. He said, yes, it is. Don't worry about it. Who's going to think about that? And then we came to the scene where I get an axe in my head. I said, how are we going to do that? He said, I got it all planned. He got 2 cleavers, big ones. And one of them, he cut out the shape of my head in the cleaver. So when the cleaver went up in the air and came down on my head, I was actually catching it and holding it on my head, and it fit all around my head, and the blood was pouring all over the place. He didn't care whether it matched or mismatched or didn't match. He just wanted to get it done. And he got it done in, 10 days, 12 days, something like that. And that included the editing and everything. And he gave it to Michigan, and Michigan made a fortune. It ran and ran and ran in those crappy theaters off Broadway. From the very first week that I was here, I started working. So I thought, if you want to be a sailor, you got to go where the water is. I didn't want to do stage anymore, because on the stage I would make, if I was lucky, I would make $100 a week. The first job I had here with Lee Horsley in a detective series, it was $1,500 a day. when I heard that on the telephone, I had to change my Fruit of the Looms. $1,500 a day? I said, I'm in the right place. I did not like the movie, but what I liked was, it was the first time I ever had an opportunity to work in front of a camera. So it was such a great learning experience, and I got over any fear of working in front of the camera. And I noticed as the movie went on, I got more comfortable, and better acting. I didn't have any problem at all. And that's what I was very grateful for. I'd go to the Lowe's movie house, and they'd go, oh, that, when Andy had one of his horrible things, like eyeballs on the dinner table or something. But the guy in the ticket box office, he said, you want the posters? And I said, yeah, and I took the posters. Toward the end of the movie, I had started having a beard, and one of the critics said that I looked like a deranged Abe Lincoln. I considered that quite a compliment. We all have different definitions of geniuses. You know, one time I was on the set, and this guy was supposed to kill this other guy. And I wasn't in that scene, so I wasn't paying too much attention. And it came to shoot that scene. And the guy who's going to kill the guy, he said, Andy, where's the knife that I killed him with? So he says to the AD, where's the knife that Danny's going to kill him with? He said, I didn't bring it. And everybody said, I didn't bring it. So there was no knife. And all of a sudden, Andy hears this carpenter putting up the set. He goes over to the cop and he says, let me borrow this. And he took his hammer and he said, hit him on the head with that. Yes, he did call me, and he told me he was doing a movie called Night Something. And he told me what it was about, and it was worse than The Bloodthirsty Butcher. So I passed on it. But an interesting thing happened after that. We became friends, which is unusual, because at first I didn't like him at all. And at first he treated me like a professional actor. But we became friends, and he lived very close to me. And one night he said, I have to tell you something, I want to talk to you. I said, okay, go ahead. He said, no, I need to talk to you in person. Would you meet me in the little Chinese restaurant that we usually go to? I said, sure. So that night, I got ready, and I went to the Chinese restaurant, and he was waiting for me. And I said, what news do you have to tell me? I thought he was going to tell me about some cockamamie new movie. And he said, I'll tell you after dinner. I said, okay. So we ordered a Chinese dinner, and we finished eating. And he said, I have to tell you something. And I said, what is it? He said, I have AIDS. I was so shocked. This was at the beginning of AIDS. I didn't know what to say. I said, Andy, I don't know what to say. He said, well, you can't say anything. And don't say anything now, because here comes the waitress. She came over and she left 2 fortune cookies and a slice of orange each. And I opened mine, and it said, going to take a trip or something like that. He opened his, and there was no fortune in it. I said, Andy, I never believed in these things before, but I do now. And that's when he started his decline. And it was very difficult to take care of him, because he was ornery, cranky, and angry. He wouldn't take any medicine. He wouldn't try to help himself. He wouldn't take AZT. He wouldn't do anything. He just wanted to go. But we did remain friends till he died. And I was with him when he died. No matter how crazy Andy was, he was very sensitive about other people. He never hurt them. He never meant to hurt them. And even when he was directing and he was pushing people around, when the shoot was over, he would make it up. He was just, I think it came from a sense of insecurity or something, but he was like Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde. He changed. He was very, very rarely happy. And he always did things and said things that would make someone sad. And when he died, I was with him and he was alone. And he was broke. And when I called the coroner and tried to make funeral arrangements, he wanted to be cremated. It was terribly expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I didn't have the money. And he didn't have any money. So consequently, he ended up being cremated in a mass grave with unknown people. And that's always haunted me. But if it were Andy sitting here, he would say, "Who cares? I think I'll put that in my next movie."